Hello, and welcome to another edition of Why Are You Laughing at Me with Gherkin Picklewater. Today, my guest is Michael Gene Sullivan of the SF Mime Troupe. Michael, can you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
I am a member of the Mime Troupe. I'm a collective member. I'm an actor, writer, director. I do what I can to, you know, overthrow fascism,
That's a
only in
noble
a funny way.
overthrow fascism in a funny way is a noble goal.
We all do what we can.
Yeah. Um, well, that kind of goes right into my next question, which you've already kind of answered, which is with your work with the Mime Troupe, what is it you're trying to accomplish? So, can you elaborate more on the idea of overthrowing fascism with humor?
Well, one thing is somebody asked me years ago, they went, well, what is the purpose of the Mime Troupe? And I said, one of the purposes of the Mime Troupe is to help create a society that doesn't need a theater company like the San Francisco Mime Troupe, to help create a country and a society where the workers are respected and empowered, where we're not under the constant threat of the oligarchy taking away all the public wealth that we have created, to make a place where the media is actually telling us the truth and good analysis and not just propaganda. It is ridiculous that we live in a country that needs a theater like the San Francisco Mime Troupe to come along and give people political analysis of what's going on in their lives. We shouldn't be necessary, but we are. And so our job really is to always help the audience see things, the news that they have, the stories that they're getting, but from a working class perspective, to understand what those interrelations are, how the class war is always raging. It's just that only one side is fighting it, and what we can do to be hopeful about being part of the struggle against it, and at the same time seeing where some of the stuff that we do, how are we complicit? How are we tacitly supporting, our oppressors? And what can we do for ourselves while we are joining linked arm with our fellow workers to make this country into the workers' paradise we all know it could be? Musical comedy.
Beautiful. Um, well, I was going to ask what was integral to the work, but you said something. You said something that really resonated with me. I'll say this: it is incredibly difficult to be an informed, sane person in our society because the information is just demoralizing, and it's constantly demoralizing, and the news is constantly demoralizing, and everything that you touch upon brings you farther and farther down. And they say I was listening to a discussion by an author about joy as resistance and her resistance to that idea that joy itself could be an act of resistance. But I think it is very much the case is that only through pursuing joy and soul-based sustenance can you continue to care about what's going on in the world around you. If you can't care about what's going on in the world around you, they just get to do whatever they want. Um,
Yeah.
you were saying a moment ago only one side was really fighting this class war. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, they're like one of the great myths of Western modern American capitalism is the idea of a middle class. There is no such thing as a middle class. It has no actual definition. The middle class was a creation by the capitalists to kind of separate some of the workers who thought they were doing better from some of the workers who they thought were doing worse. So the idea of the middle class is a creation of se- creating a section of the working class who identifies with the owners, who identifies with their bosses, who identifies with the capitalists, to go, I'm one of them. I am aspiring to be up there. And therefore, I'm anti union. I don't care about the unhoused. I don't care about all of these public things. I need my taxes lowered because I need to lower the taxes for the millionaires and billionaires because someday I'll be one. You know, I don't want to have to rely on all of the public wealth that is our inheritance. As a country, I instead want to be, off by myself, spending my own money meanly. We have a country full of people who aspire to be Scrooge rather than aspiring to be Bob Cratchit. We have a country of people who aspire to be, what is it? I can't remember who the writer. It might have been Mom. Was it Somerset Maugham who said in the 30s, Americans are basically see themselves as temporarily embarrassed millionaires.
Yes.
And so we, as a worker owned organization, we are a nonprofit, but we run as a collective, and we openly acknowledge that we are working class people, because to be working class, all that means is that you actually rely on your income for your life.
Mhm.
Like, there are going to be people who are presidents of banks and stuff, and they're still getting an income, but they don't need it. They don't need it to make rent. They don't need it for food. They don't need it for their kids. They're millionaires and multimillionaires. Just because they're still making money doesn't make them working class. The working class are the people who are actually working for a living, Even if you own a corner store, then you're a worker owner. If you're a doctor, a lawyer, a candlestick maker, you're an artisan worker. And we need that kind of solidarity and recognition of each other. And to be able to proudly say you're in the working class is such a revolutionary act. To be able to sit in your bark lounger in front of the football game or whatever and just go, I'm in the working class, and be proud of it, not to be ashamed of it. They've managed to make us ashamed of the fact that we live off the sweat of our own brow rather than parasitically living off the sweat of somebody else's, because that's what capitalists do. That's what they strive to do. Again, musical comedy.
You mentioned Bob Cratchit, and everything you just said seems to uh, orbit around the same basic premise, which is that we fear vulnerability. We fear being perceived as weak as a society, and it is that weakness that is what poverty represents to us. Is that by admitting that we are not, you know, that we don't have a place at the table, we have to look at our own vulnerability, our own weakness in relation to those who rule and control. And that's very difficult for, I mean, I don't know about other cultures, but for Americans it is nigh impossible
Very,
with
very
the way
tough. I mean, for us to be able to go, it's like you're saying, a seat at the table. We built the table and we built the seats. And as one ex-president actually said, very intelligently, the wealthy in this country are wealthy and have power by the acquiescence of the workers. You know, they tremble in fear every evening before they go to bed, knowing that if we ever actually went, you know what, we don't need them. We can do this, so much of this by ourselves. We don't need the rich. They serve no real purpose. And if we all realize that, if they all disappeared tomorrow, things would go on. But if nurses disappeared, if teachers disappeared, if construction workers disappeared, if all of those during the pandemic, when it was like, oh, these are the essential workers, for that brief shining moment, Americans realized who was essential and who wasn't. And now we've been forgetting it again, thinking that, oh, the nearest billionaire is on my side. That's the person that we need to have in charge. And we need to, like you said, we need to acknowledge the joy in our lives, acknowledge the fun of the fight back against them. And one thing I tell people is, I don't want somebody joining a struggle, because sometimes people who join struggles, they just like to struggle. I want people joining the joyous march to inevitable victory, because that's a hell of a lot more attractive and something that I think we should all want to be a part of. We, the people, have to, take our country back. And the Mime Troupe is out there every summer and sometimes winter doing what we can to remind people that, again, that what this country can be in terms of we the people ownership of it is something to always strive for. We got children, we got grandchildren, we have great grandchildren that we want to leave more to, not more gadgets. We don't want to leave them, the newest phone. That stuff's irrelevant. We need to leave them civil rights. We need to leave them some kind of an investment in our civil society, and to participate in it, and the benefits of our public wealth that we all worked so hard for. That should be basic, you know. And so, like I said, so the Mime Troupe, we go out there and we are doing political musical comedy, a Tony Award winning, Obie Award winning, internationally. We just got another international, the Prize of Peace Award, um, which was very nice. It's from a company in Denmark, I believe. They do a thing
That's
with
very cool.
yeah, they do a thing with Delarte
Okay.
up in Blue Lake every year. One year they do it in Europe, and one year they do it in the United States. And this year it was me and Valina Brown and the Mime Troupe won the award of to that. It's all about the prize of hope. It's about inspiring people in these difficult times to kind of be their best and kindest selves, but not mushy about it. To be part of the fight, but at the same time not to be bitter. You know.
There's I don't want to say it's a growing wave because there's so little of it. It's more like someone's splashing in a kiddie pool right now, but it feels like there is a progression within our American society right now towards um, leftism, towards democratic socialism, towards uh, the progressive and what would be considered, extreme just a few years ago. And it's something I'm thrilled about. I've been a democratic socialist for about 15, 20 years,
Mhm.
since I found out that was a thing. And to see them taking major offices now and progressing us in that direction is excellent, is wonderful. And so I feel like that march that you talk about is something that people are becoming more aware of, and maybe that'll make it easier to get people to join in step with it. Um, so the Mime Troupe's been around since 1959, is that correct?
Yep, founded. Actually, the Mime Troupe was originally founded when it was the RG Mime Studio or something. It was a class of silent mime, and this guy RG Davis, he had this idea. He wanted to teach kind of silent mime and commedia and melodrama in a class in San Francisco, and but it was a time when civil rights was starting to come more to the fore, and the war in Vietnam was just starting to be in the news, and so the company started becoming more political. And then at some point, they realized that you can only get complex ideas across by like talking about them. You can't talk. It's hard to talk about all that stuff when you're trapped in a glass box or walking against the wind or pulling on an imaginary rope. You can't do really incisive political analysis that way. So they changed the name San Francisco Mime Troupe. But mime is the exaggeration of
Mhm.
everyday life in story and song. Not only that, so it's not just silent. Mimos as a style, which is ancient Greek, which was specifically a part of theater that was about mocking the powerful. So we fall right into that. The unfortunate thing is, you know, through the 60s and 70s, silent mime became more and more of a thing. So people kind of forgot about the other definition, but we're too famous to change the name. We'd have to scrub it off our Tony Award. And so we stay out there, as Ed Holmes used to say, we're always there to confuse people about what mime is. Um, and to always make sure that we have a clear mission. Our mission is different from pretty much every other theater company in that we are actively activists. We are openly trying to activate the audience, not through a bunch of metaphors and similes and, oh, this chair represents Afghanistan kind of stuff, but to openly talk about things and create plays that are about what's happening now in the moment. That's one of the reasons we very seldom can redo shows. Only a few of our shows really work later, like years later, because things have evolved, things have changed. We are trying to get more of our shows actually out to universities and colleges, just the scripts, so that those departments, those dramatic departments, can see how did the mime troupe deal with this in 1985? How did we deal with the Contras in Central America? How did we deal with the first and second Iraq War? How did we deal with the gun issue in the United States, police brutality? How did we deal with it as opposed to what the media was saying in general? To kind of let the students know that there are other options.
Wonderful. Um, yeah, it's being temporal is it's a double-edged sword. I mean, you have the zeitgeist in your hand, but that zeitgeist, as you said, it changes so rapidly and so commonly. Um, when you are crafting a show, this is a kind of a two-part question for you.
Mhm.
Um, how do you go about creating a new piece? And secondarily, what's your theoretical framework for knowing it's going to be effective?
I don't know. See, when people ask, like, how long does it take for me personally to write a mime troupe show? It's relatively quickly. I start some shows, just a few weeks before we start rehearsal. Some a little earlier, some later. What takes a long time is research. I'll do 6 months of research. I'm reading articles. I'm reading historical books. I have all these books behind me. These are all history books. Um, I'm reading all of this stuff, watching interviews, listening to podcasts to try to figure out what's missing. What is the part that is missing? What's the story that would knit all of these different ideas together? And then once I start getting an idea, I go to the collective and I say, well, here's what I would like to write about this year. Are you guys cool with that? And sometimes they're like, yes. Sometimes they're like, we need more information. This year, because the story is so complex, they were like, we need more information on this. I'm telling 4 different stories that interweave, the story of a woman who is she has just joined a small kind of televangelist church, and she is an absolute true believer, but she is starting to find some irregularities in the church's books. And so she is the minister in charge is trying to distract her with different things because she has real questions about this, but she is absolutely a true believer. Then the next story is about older Japanese American woman who is selling flowers on the street. And despite all of the things that are going on in her life, she may be losing her home, she may be losing what she does in terms of flower selling and all of that. But she has convinced herself, because her parents were in the internment camps in World War II, that the most important thing is to keep your head down. Don't draw attention to yourself. Be quiet, because otherwise the state will step in. And her parents went to the internment camps because they were so loud about protesting it. Then there's another story about a Silicon Valley engineer who wanted to make things to make the world a better place. And now he's working with AI. And he's like, I'm just making crap to make stock prices better. I'm making the world a worse place. But I thought that I was helping people, but it's just about money. And then there's a Filipino American immigrant who has joined the National Guard to get his citizenship. But he finds that what he's being asked to do is police protesters who are just trying to express their freedom of speech. And he's like, is my citizenship worth this? So each of the different stories is a person who has made a choice of their own free will. And now they're having to question that choice and to go, can I still be me? How much of this choice is me? And how much of it is a mistake that I've made? I've been a misinterpretation. I've lied to myself. Who am I if I make a different choice? So when I was presenting this to the collective, they were going, that's really complex, because they don't happen sequentially. They happen like, they interweave and overlap and end up in each other's stories without really knowing each other. And they're like, how are you going to make this funny? And what are we going to do? Um, so I had to keep, I'd write a section and I would show it to them, and they would go, okay, we start to understand it. And then when we started rehearsal, I had about 7 of the scenes done. And then the person who has the very difficult job for us is Daniel Savio, who is our composer lyricist. He gets the script like when we're getting ready to start rehearsals, which is about 5 weeks before we're going to open the show. So that's when I give him all the script that I have. And then he has to start writing songs. I get it to him as soon as I can. But this year, it wasn't until, the end of May that I could start sending him things. And then he goes off and he comes back and he's got this song for scene 1, this song for scene 2. And we talk about where songs should go in, maybe here, maybe here. This is a reprise. This is an expansion of that song. And then how do all the different musical worlds blend together? And then so while we're rehearsing the show, we do basically what Broadway does, only they take 2 years. You go off with your Broadway script and you workshop it and take it to different towns and you do all this stuff before you open there. We do all of that in 4 or 5 weeks. where we're reading the script, blocking the script. We'll block a whole scene in a song, and then I'll come in the next day and go, I gotta cut this, change this. We've got to adapt to that. Daniel will bring in a song. I've got to rewrite the scene to make sure the song fits into it. And then he'll go, okay, I want to change the lyrics over here, and because they're redundant to this part that you've written in the scene, we don't want to use the same terms too often. So it's a pretty intense thing running up to the 4th of July. And I know it's difficult for some of the actors when I'm in the show because I write of the last, since 2000, I think I've written all but 2 shows. And if I'm not on stage, I normally wrote the show or I directed it. But it's weird for the actors when they're talking to me on stage in a scene and I just stop and go, okay, cut that line. They're like, am I talking to you as the writer or the director or the actor? What do you, and I'm like, it's all of it right now. I'm sorry. And then we get to a point where everybody, I think I've cut most of the stuff. I don't want to make the actors have to do cuts late,
Yeah,
to do something. So it's going to be too hard to remember. Daniel doesn't want to do that with the songs. And then we open and then, yeah, and that's it. And then we go out there trying to figure out what's going to work. I talk to people about writing comedy. When I was young, I wanted to be a history teacher. And then that was my goal, was to be a history teacher. And then I started writing short stories in junior high, horror short stories. And my stories were, oh God, I wanted to go on to be a horror short story writer. My stories were so psychologically challenging for the teachers that they wouldn't let me read them in class. They would just give me the A, but they say, you cannot read this in class. It's too disturbing. But I was convinced that comedy was impossible to write. I listened to comedy all the time. I listened to Richard Pryor and George Carlin and Mort Saul as a kid. I listened to all of these comedians all the time. But I was like, I don't understand how they do that. So I thought, well, I'll write horror stories. Then I ended up being an actor and then a director. And then once I got to the mime troupe, we were doing a show and there was a scene that wasn't funny enough. And so I went, well, let me take a crack at it. And I wrote it and they were like, hilarious. And after that, I was like, oh, that's how you write comedy. You just try to write what that character would truthfully say, and because that character is different from everybody else, what they say is going to be weird to other people sometimes. The way they see the world, the way this character sees the world versus that character is, comedy. It's just these particular characters and these particular situations.
absolutely. Uh, the dogma that I was learned under for comedy and clown was about vulnerability. That's where the comedy
Mm-hmm.
comes from, is that vulnerability we were talking about earlier. It is exposing your ugliness and your weirdness and your the places where you don't fit into the mold properly. Um, those are we could talk for another hour about the ideas behind what does and does not make comedy work. But I have a different question for you. Aside from this show right now, what is the name of the show that is called Wreckage?
Wreckage, yes.
Wreckage. Aside from Wreckage, what is a performance role or project that you are most proud of, or particularly proud of?
That is a really difficult question because every year people will ask me sometimes, just with mime troupe shows, what's your favorite one? And I'm like, the one I'm working on, is always my favorite. Um, but I had a show that opened at SF Playhouse and San Diego Rep a few years ago called The Great Con, which I was very proud of. I'm still trying to get that show produced on the East Coast. I think the show that I've done that has had the biggest impact is not a mime troupe show. It's my adaptation of 1984, which opened in 2008 in Los Angeles, directed by the actor Tim Robbins, the
Okay.
actor director Tim
Yeah.
Robbins, and it played at his theater, the Actors Gang, and they toured it around the country for like the next 11 years. I'm sorry, around the world.
Yeah.
It's translated into a bunch of different languages now. Right now, it is playing in Kyiv, Ukraine, and it's been playing in Ukrainian since before the pandemic. But it's played, in China and Australia, and it's just played on I think 5 continents. And I'm really very proud of the adaptation because it is so different. And one of the things when I was working on it, I was like, people adapt 1984 as a periodically as a stage play or as a music or as a movie, but they always take the politics out. You're like, you've read 1984,
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like in the middle of the book is Goldstein's book, and they normally cut that. They cut what's in Goldstein's book, which is a critique of capitalism, because Orwell was a socialist. So he wrote this critique of capitalism and how it eats up public wealth and how it keeps people afraid and how it uses war to destroy useful things and all of this amazing stuff. And they almost always take that out. They pretend like it is just a sci-fi story. So, because it's easier and they're just selling the name. So in my adaptation, small cast. I wrote it with a really small cast and almost no set because I wanted any theater in the world to be able to do it cheap. You could do it with 5 chairs, you know, um, and if you do it right, it'll work. You don't even need a bunch of lighting. Uh, so so I wanted to make sure to show Orwell's critique. And my play doesn't take place in London. My adaptation, it takes place wherever you're doing the play. So in Kiev, it takes place in Kiev. When it was in Buenos Aires, it was Buenos Aires. When it's in wherever it is, schools have done it. Some schools have done it. So it's a really, I think, in terms of big impact, I've done a lot of things that have had impact in different ways, but 1984 has had the biggest impact.
Oh, that's amazing. Um, I don't want to eat up too much of your time, but I have a few more questions
Yeah.
before I can let you go. What is a project due to cost or scope or any other kind of restraint that you've always wanted to pursue but haven't been able to yet?
Well, I have a show that I wrote some years ago, and I've done readings of it in the Bay Area and New York, but it's 10 actors, which nowadays is tough, and it's not a musical. It's before the Civil War, there was a event called the Riot at Christiana, which took
Okay.
place in southern Pennsylvania, where some slave owners came up to find some escaped slaves and bring them back to Maryland, where they were from. And instead of running away to Canada or just to run, they decided to stay and fight. And so this whole battle happens in this little town. And it is a moment where, these escaped slaves decide that, we're free and we get to fight for our freedom. And so I read about this story a couple of decades ago and I researched it and I looked and I found the court documents because the whole thing ends up as a court case. Um, and I decided to write a big play about it. And so I've been pitching that play around the United States for years now. And the readings all go really well. And people go, oh my God, this is a great. And I've had great actors, film actors, and television, theater actors. And they all do it. And they go, somebody's got to do this. But unless I win the lottery, that's a tough one. And so that one. And also a few years ago, I wrote an adaptation of A Christmas Carol for the
Hmm.
Mime Troupe, which we got to do one time, like 2 years ago. We did it in San Francisco at Z Space Studios. You know Michael McShane?
Maybe.
Yeah, McShane I mean, he's kind of like an international comedy person.
Okay.
He's on Whose Line Is It Anyway, the English version, and he's done a
Okay.
bunch of film and stuff, and he's in Edinburgh right now doing a show. He came back to be Scrooge. I knew him from when he was doing improv in San Francisco. So he came back and played my Scrooge, and the Mime Troupe did it, and it went really well. And people were like, this is the way Dickens would have wanted it. But we can't afford to rent a theater on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we do free shows in the park. And so our park fees might be a couple $100, whereas renting a theater is going to be a couple $1,000s a night.
Yeah.
So that's too bad. That show, it did well. People loved it. And I would really I've actually sent that script to companies around the country saying, look, you guys can do this for free. We just want the message of what Dickens was actually saying about shared humanity. And most theater companies change Christmas Carol into a story about one creaky old guy who's a bit of a bastard. And if he would change, Christmas would be fun. And that is not what Dickens wrote. Dickens is writing about the Cratchits. And he's talking about not about that one guy, but how all of us need to see our shared humanity. And Scrooge is simply an example of a capitalist But his redemption isn't the point. The change is for the audience. It doesn't matter if Scrooge has a heart attack and dies. The change that's supposed to happen is in the audience. It's in the reader. And so I think most productions let the audience off the hook by making it all about Scrooge. So I wrote ours, which I call a Red Carol. And yeah, so those are things I really want. Fugitive Slave Act is the only play I've written that has never been produced, and it is one of the most dangerous plays I've written. And as I tell people, theater is incredibly dangerous. It should be dangerous. We should be telling dangerous ideas to the audience, things that they putting together things in an analysis. They go, oh my God, I never saw it like that. We need to change this injustice. We need to change this sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, transphobia. We need to fight for freedom in a way that is, like I said, fun, but at the same time necessary. Theater is dangerous, and that's one of the reasons that governments always go after theater. They go after comedians. They go after people who are truth tellers speaking truth to power. And if we have the opportunity to do that, we need to grab it and use it with full gusto, you know? And so, yeah, Fugitive Slave Act, which I really like, but I got to find a theater that can do it.
Theaters are, I do theatrical production myself, and
Mm,
it is a constant, I mean, just for myself, my own
mm.
shows. As I was saying, I believe I was saying, oh yeah, I do. Oh, did I lose you again?
No, no, no,
Okay,
no.
the screen jumped away. As I was
Okay.
saying, I do theatrical production myself, and it is very, very costly and prohibitive. I just did a run at the San Francisco Fringe, which cost
Oh, really?
many. I'm sorry, the Hollywood Fringe. Hollywood Fringe. I did San Francisco
Uh-huh.
Fringe in its final year last year, but Hollywood Fringe this year, and it was many thousands of dollars to do a tiny
Oh,
little
God.
two-person show, uh, and it's just our part of the arts community in the Bay Area seems to be contracting and ossifying, and it is amazing and wonderful that the Mime Troupe continues to put on these free shows for the public in public venues, because our community is draining away, and that is just another product of this constant battle towards the survivability of our society and the survivability of the arts. All that aside, you were just talking about speaking truth to power. I wanted to get a quick question in for you. What are some works, not your works, but just works in general, or artists or media that you find underrated that more people should be giving their attention to?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's like I don't see as much theater as I should because on the one hand, I'm a writer, so I'm always writing stuff, and most of my inspiration doesn't come from other people's work. It comes from history and news and all those depressing things that people avoid. Um, and then when I'm not writing a show, I'm in a show because I'm an actor. So I don't get to see as many things as I would like to. But like Christopher Chen's Headlands, which was at ACT a few years ago, was a beautiful and amazing show. And what he did with it artistically in terms of whose point of view it was, and learning about the different characters, the characters that you fall in love with, that you see their flaws, the characters that you naturally hate, that you find their humanity, was really so well done. Um, Shows like I know that Adam Kuva Newman recently did a one man version of Assassins at in Oakland, where he played all the parts. That kind of bravery and tenacity of storytelling is, I think, what we theater for me is. It is the working class town square. You know, it's where we all can come together and have our questions about ourselves and about our community and about our society kind of hashed out for cheap, because you can't rely on film to do that because they have to go through so many corporate loops. I wrote years ago, I was commissioned to write a film, a biography of Duke Ellington. And so I got flown to New York and I was in LA and I'm doing meetings with producers and all this stuff. And so I'm writing the film and I finished my screenplay and they love it. They tell me they love it so much. And then they asked me, can you do just one thing? Because it's mainly the story of Duke Ellington and his son being separated when his son was young and then coming back together. It's all a true story. And they said, yeah, can you give Duke Ellington like a heroin problem? And I was like, no, he didn't have a heroin problem. These are Hollywood producers. And they said, yeah, but, the film Ray came out and he had a heroin problem. So the film did really well. And I'm like, that's not why the film did well. He had a problem and he got over it. And they're like, yeah, so he overcame his heroin problem. So could you do that? And I said, no, I'm not going to give Duke Ellington a heroin problem for you. And they went, okay, fine. And then they came back about a week later and they said, can you give him a drinking problem? And I said, no. Duke Ellington famously didn't drink. I mean, he was known throughout the jazz community as the guy who didn't drink. And they were like, well, you've got to give him something. I said, it's a story of a black man and his son and his wife. And it's got all the drama, the ups and downs, the twists and turns, and where he breaks down and all of that stuff. Why does he have to have this particular flaw just because he's a black guy? I'm like, oh no, that's not it. But it really worked well. And Ray, and what was the other one? Bird. Oh yeah, Bird had a heroin problem. And so I was like, no. And then they said, well, can you write a part in it? It sounds fake, but this is true. They asked, can you write a part in it for Scarlett Johansson? And I said, why? And they said, well, we can get Scarlett Johansson for the film. And I said, there is no part for Scarlett Johansson in this film. If you have a story that's mainly about black people and you introduce one white person, the entire story becomes about the one white person. Not because of racism or anything. It's just they're the outsider. If you had a film that's all women and you put one man in, the film becomes about the one man. He becomes the outsider who has to learn things for the audience. That's why he's there. And I said, so no, I'm not going to write a role for Scarlett Johansson. So it went from the producers loving my film to wanting to change all of this stuff. And then finally I just said, never mind. And I pulled the script and I came back to San Francisco. And people were like, even the producer one of the producers lived up here, is like, but they would have made your film and they would have paid you so much money. And it's like, I'm not going to do that for mere money. I have to live with myself. I'm not going to lie and twist this story around for you and just for money. That is not worth it. So having the opportunity to create stories that are interesting and feel real, even if it's not a real true story like that one. I've dealt with a producer on 1984, the film. I've been approached by producers to make a film of that. And they keep wanting to go, can we put more sex in it? Can we change this and take it? I'm like, no, just don't make my film. I don't need you, but too many screenplay writers are so desperate to have their stuff done that they will just write crap, or they will write wonderful pieces and then they will allow the producers to have control of it and they will make it into the crap that Hollywood makes. Plays, on the other hand, are normally have a harsher point. And the theaters pick that play because they want to do that play. They don't pick it to change it. So theater is much braver. It's much less money. It is much more threadbare. ACT are big companies. Shakespeare Santa Cruz, companies that are operating on a big shoestring or a thin shoestring, but they're nothing compared to film.
Yeah.
But film is just normally a series of lies, unless you're watching a documentary, and then it's still a little weird. But theater can be passionate, in your face, and it is the working class talking to each other. And that's what makes it dangerous.
That's also what makes it lovely. That is, thank you for sharing that, Michael. Before we wrap up, Wreckage, can you tell us a little bit more about the show that's going on now?
Well, one of the things when back last year, like I said, I've watched people get so depressed on my behalf for how much news I have to watch and read. And they're like, how can you do that? And I'm like, it's my job. I write topical plays. But one of the things was going to protests last summer and looking around at all of these people And I started to occur to me as I would talk to some folks that they kind of assumed that everybody at the protest was there for the same reason. That not that they were bad or good, but that they kind of had come to the same conclusion. I was like, no, everybody has got a different path of realization about the country they live in, about their place in the country, about the things that they've taken for granted. Everybody has their own path to when they get to that point where they go, I'm going to a protest, even if I've never been to one before. What is that last straw? And so that was what I wanted to write the show about, to write it and so that the audience can see people that aren't like them. So often people will go to see a show because there's people like them. It's like, no, I want you to see what is it like to see someone whose parents were in an internment camp, or somebody else who's an immigrant who desperately wants citizenship because they love this country, at least what they think it is supposed to be, and their terror every day of, you love the United States, but you're also terrified that you'll be thrown out at any moment. A lot of audience members can't relate to that, but they need to see it, you know. Seeing somebody who's essentially in a sort of religious cult, but to see it from their perspective, this is not they see it as making the world a better place. Or the Silicon Valley engineer who has to accept at some level that he's not the person he wanted to be. And can he let go of all of the money? Can he let go of all of this? Or is it more important to sustain his lifestyle? These are all these different people. The person you're standing next to at a No Kings rally, the person that you're standing next to on the barricades, holding back the cops from taking protesters. Everybody has their own story. And that's what Wreckage is all of these stories. And how do we end up in a common place and have a common bond? And in these days, as bad as things are, how can we find some hope?
So where can people find Wreckage?
Well, uh, if they go, the best way to do it is to go online to our website, SFMT for San Francisco Mime Troupe.org, and go to our website, and there'll be a thing up there that says, current shows, and you go to the schedule, and it shows all the places we're playing. We're playing Santa Cruz, but we're also playing two shows in San Jose, and we've got a show in Palo Alto coming up. And then this week we're going off to Davis. And so we'll be all over the Bay Area. But in terms of South Bay, those are the 4 shows that we have coming up on different dates. And so check out the schedule and be able to figure out which is the most convenient one for you. And come on out and bring some money, because that's another thing. People will say, well, how does the Mime Troupe actually make money? We don't do this for free. It's free to see. And we don't take money from corporations. They don't offer it, and we don't take it. So there are foundations and government grants, but we also very much rely on donations from the audience after the show. And I'll say, what'd you pay to see your last Hollywood piece of crap? What do you pay for Netflix? People will pay Netflix so much money per month and not even watch Netflix. So they're just shoveling money to this corporation, to Hulu, to Google, or whoever. And we're like, give us a percentage of that. Give us what you pay for Netflix. Each person in your part group, if each one gave us what they paid for Netflix, if everybody in the audience did that, our checks would clear. Right now, we're in a struggle to make sure we have enough money to finish our season.
Yeah.
We're always having to raise money, but we're raising it from the people. We've had corporations, seriously, even this year, corporations that have come out and said, we will fund a bunch of your stuff. We'll fund this because we know we see what you're doing. And I'm like, no. You're mime washing is what you're doing. You just want to say that you funded us so that you'll seem cool. And most importantly, even if they never did try to edit our stuff, every theater company that takes that money will start editing themselves. Because they'll start going, oh, we got that money from Google, but we can't say anything bad about Google because maybe they won't give it to us next year. You don't even want to be in that position.
Yeah.
But like I said, it means we rely on the audience.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. And I will be seeing the show in Palo Alto on the 12th, I believe.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm really, really looking forward to it. And this will go up sometime this week, and I will send you a copy of it when it does. Okay.
Great. Thank you so
It was
much.
lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Me too. See
All
you
right.
later.